Join me weekend mornings, 6 to 8.
If you were to ask any retiree in a word, they would tell you that retirement is all about income. Income in retirement is a permission slip to enjoy life. Income provides the freedom to spend money each month, knowing that more will arrive next month and the month after that. As important as it is to accumulate assets for your retirement, it's equally, if not more important, to maximize the income being generated from your assets. My name is Jerry Doherty, and my radio program, Making Money Last, has been heard right here on WCRN. Well, do you know if your retirement income is as high as it could be? Are you living off less than you should be? Well, I'd like to offer you a complimentary review to answer that question. Simply call my office at 877-772-1776. I'm conveniently located right on Route 9 in Westboro. Again, my number is 877-772-1776. Let's increase your income today.
We know why you're awake. Your child is about to get their driver's license. Levante's Auto School offers 1-week driving programs to help make sure your child stays safe and focused behind the wheel.
877-DRIVE-ED.
And who's Ed? That's the number for Levante's Auto School.
Learn to drive safely and efficiently. Visit one of our 5 locations throughout Massachusetts. Click Levante'sAutoschool.com.
Levante's Auto School shows you how to learn the rules and keep your cool. 877-DRIVE-ED.
Who's Ed? That's the number for Levante's Auto School.
The following is a paid program. The opinions are those of the host and guests, and not necessarily those of the station or its management.
You are about to undertake a 2-hour experience of eye-opening, mind-expanding, revealing common sense discussion for the common sense citizen. Strap yourself in, put your trays in the upright position, remove dentures and loose jewelry, get comfortable, take a deep breath, and come along for the ride. It is time for the Joe Mangiacotti Show on Powerhouse Station WCRN 830, and our affiliates and streaming on the TuneIn app. It's Joe time, baby.
Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show here in AM 830 WCRN. Of course, our affiliates as well. We're broadcasting from the Box Drop Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios, and actually I'm broadcasting from an undisclosed remote location this morning. Hey, good morning, Cam.
Good morning.
Sorry about that. Caught you off guard. We don't see each other, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So you're in the main control room, and I'm off campus, if you will. So let's do some of the housekeeping, folks. Reminding you can join the conversation anytime at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. You also have the text line open and available to you, and it's real simple. You text it like you would anybody else at 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. And if you don't have the ability to text, you can, of course, email at textjoeintheradio, all one word, at gmail.com. It appears on the same screen. So we try to intertwine it into the live radio. Don't forget, you can tell Alexa to play WCRN, and she'll do that with no questions asked. And you can follow us on all our social media platforms at Joe Mangi Show, M-A-N-G-I, Joe Mangi. And that also means that we're live streaming on the Facebook app. So if you go to our Facebook page, which you can get to by going to what? Joe Mangi Show. There's a camera, actually even a camera in this studio. But the important thing is the audio is streaming there. So you have multiple ways of listening to the show live in real time. And not to mention that you can always listen to past shows via our podcasts as well. All right, 508-871-7000 from our Box Drop Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios. All right, open lines today. We have no scheduled guests. We're just going to take this Sunday morning to talk about what's going on and really what we should be doing about it. It's got to be. Well, we'll get into the latest shootings in a minute. But overall here, see, we have Nancy Pelosi in the House of Representatives, which is the most radical ever, and quite frankly, pushing through one outrageous bill after another to nationalize elections with the H.R. 1 bill, to open the borders, funneling money down to the NGOs, and rewarding blue states for bad She knows it's not going to get too far in the Senate, at least we hope not, but they're pushing Biden to do unilaterally with executive orders things in violation of the Constitution and separation of powers. House of Representatives is utterly and completely out of control. We just passed in the House, unfortunately, that $2 trillion. Now, they tried to make it sound not so bad, so they came in at $1.9 trillion. But hey, the number is roughly $2 trillion. They just didn't want it to sound too big. But what the people lose sight of is that last year, $4.1 trillion was appropriated to deal with COVID-19, to deal with the economic situation, and also to deal with Operation Warp Speed, as well as trying to get unemployment benefits out to people. That's what was spent last year. And back in December, there was a $900 billion check written right before Christmas that was appropriated specifically for COVID relief. Do you remember that? That's when the media asked Nancy Pelosi why she decided to negotiate now. And she basically said because the election happened. And now we have new footing to negotiate on, because she was playing politics with your lives and your money. This is all just liberal wish list stuff. The National Endowment of the Arts gets $200 million. The National Endowment of Humanities, gets $200 million. Did you know that these were even two different things? It's stuff like that that's in the bill. State and local governments getting $350 billion. And they put this formula in the bill where if you're a blue state that has had terrible lockdown policies and your unemployment rates are through the roof, you're getting significantly more money than, say, a state like Florida that actually managed the pandemic while letting people get back to work. This is how they're rewarding bad behavior. This is how they're rewarding blue state governors. This is the true bailout that's happening. And it's one of the worst ways to spend money. The other thing, and this is very important, our economy is rebounding. In every state that is allowed to open their businesses, they are getting back to work. People are returning to their jobs. People are tired of being locked down. And they're going back to their lives. If we would just let them open up, we wouldn't need to spend all this money. Trump told us, right? He said the stock market would hit new highs and would see a boom in the economy. It is just rumbling underneath the draconian lockdowns and the overreaching restrictions. The Democrats don't care about science. They prove it at every turn. They don't care about economics. They care about politics. And that's what's happening in the D.C. swamp now. And when it comes to the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing, the Biden administration says the U.S. has no plans to boycott, but the number of companies coming out against the Georgia election law is growing every day. And one of the biggest critics is Coca-Cola, but they're even an Olympic partner. Delta CEO condemned the legislation, but the company calls itself the most China-friendly U.S. airline. And Major League Baseball consistently pushes itself into the Chinese market. China expert and president of Population Research Institute, Steve Marshall, has told us the world is not paying nearly enough attention to what's going on in China and the China human rights situation. And I've been tooting this whistle for a long time, folks, about really having to watch China. It is the worst that it has been in 40 years. Back in the 1980s, they were forcibly aborting and sterilizing Chinese women under the one-child policy. Now there are about 12 million Uyghurs, mostly Muslim, living in the northwestern China province. And today they're forcibly aborting and sterilizing Uyghur women who are part of the Turkish-speaking minority. And it's not just that. Today, in 2021, they have in China re-education camps for Christians. They have secret camps where they're told that they have no other god than Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party. There are churches being turned into brainwashing centers. Now, they call them, and get this, civilization practice sessions for the new era. But that's just another term for brainwashing. They have forced organ harvesting of the Falun Gong Buddhists, peaceful Buddhists who don't do anything. They're peaceful, but they're being arrested and harvested for their organs. It's kind of like a human sacrifice, but instead of just ripping the beating heart out of the chest of someone and offering it to the sun god, you actually sell it on the open market for $125,000 or $30,000, give or take. And Israel is the only nation that has banned going to China for a transplant operation. The destruction of Tibetan culture is happening again today. Then there's the strangulation of Hong Kong's democracy in full view of the world. And Taiwan is next, and that will place us, the United States, right in the middle of it. The crushing of dissent of all kinds. I mean, there's no freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of religion, freedom of movement, freedom of anything in China today. It's high-tech dictatorship, digital dictatorship. And that's happening here in the USA every day. We have this debate going on, big tech. And of course, we have the unleashing of the pandemic upon the world. How does Joe Biden, the leader of the free world, spend 2 hours on the phone with Xi Jinping and not bring up the fact millions of people have died and trillions of economic losses have been suffered because of a pandemic that China released upon the world? It is so beyond me. Then, of course, we have the schools and the union situation, completely outrageous. But once again, the unions care about the unions. The union does not care about the children. The students aren't the ones paying the dues. The union, quite frankly, doesn't really care much about the teachers. They only care about the union itself. And it's in this bill they're appropriating about $100 billion to reopen schools. And that money doesn't have to be spent in this calendar year. They can spend that money going out to 2028. So you have to ask the question, how does money to open up schools can be spent in 2028? That doesn't make any sense at all to anybody who can actually understand numbers and can look at a calendar. The other thing that is important and you need to understand is that there's still $55 billion available to school districts to open up. They don't need money, they need leadership. And unfortunately, it's going to take parents of these communities, most of them in blue cities, to go to their city and the city councils and the school boards and demand that the schools reopen. Look at Florida. The Biden administration doesn't need to rely on the CDC. All they need to do is just go down to Tallahassee and talk to Ron DeSantis, because they've been back in school since August of last year. We were told that everything and everyone is racist, and that systemic racism is everywhere from our legal system to even our highways, that racism is now weaved into our transportation system, and highways should be rerouted. After existing right where they are for decades, what would the consequences of that move be today? We watched with our own eyes the burning, looting, and assaults all summer long, and the answer was to tear down our statues and monuments with no thought or debate, but with mob mentality and sometimes in the dark of night. So the cry of racism continues here. It's get to be obnoxious in America. Racism is something that has obviously been a major issue for our country. We know most of the history. I think we're all aware of it for the most part. But the country is changing quite rapidly. And the reason why the left continues to go back to race, why they pull the race card and throw the horrible accusation of racism when they have no substance of the argument for those things that they actually want to do. The left always goes back and tries to bring up phrases like Jim Crow or voter suppression. Have you been watching this debacle in Georgia? It's because they understand that to black Americans or Hispanic Americans or white Americans, honestly, it doesn't really matter, that when people actually get a chance to see these policies and actually learn about these policies, they will reject them. But unfortunately, a lot of Americans still fall prey to the notion that racism is rampant in America. It's simply not true, folks. It's actually quite false. Do we have incidences occasionally? Yes, unfortunately we do. Not to the degree they want you to think, Because we're people. None of us are angels. We are not perfect. But the vast majority of our country are just good, solid people, and they want to live in harmony and peace. They want their kids to play in basketball leagues and football leagues and at baseball games. They don't care that the other kids on the team are black or Hispanic or white. People want to go to work. They want to go to church. They want to go to the store and movies. They just want to live their lives. That truly is America. The reason why the elite push so hard is because for the first time since the mid-1960s, black voters are actually looking for a political home, as are Hispanic. Why did Trump get more votes from these voter blocs than any other Republican? They just want a country where they can grow and flourish, where their kids can grow and flourish. And those policies and the common sense answers reside in conservatism. Again, conservatism, not the Republican Party. They have done an awful job reaching out and communicating. We have rhinos wall to wall. And we have to hold the Republican Party accountable. We actually have to communicate and get out and speak to the minority communities. When conservatism is brought to all people, Americans embrace it, and that's why the left consistently goes back to race. Right now, it is important for people, Americans, not to to block out the fluff and the noise that they see on the cable news shows, and what they're all trying to do is just distract you from what's really happening in America. The Biden administration has decimated the energy independence we had just months ago, and the gas tax and high gas and oil prices are the most devastating to low-income Americans and middle-income Americans who have to stay focused on the things that are real and stop listening to the misdirection from the left. 508-871-7000. That's how you join the conversation. 508-871-7000. I'm Joe Mangiacotti, and this is the Joe Mangiacotti Show Sunday edition. Also, don't forget our text line, 617-297-8388. And we have to go look at that from time to time. So, once again, we have violence targeted towards police. Just yesterday, 2 deputies shot in Salt Lake City. The suspect is dead after exchange of gunfire. See, the 2 sheriff deputies were shot, wounded as they patrolled the area around the sheriff's offices. That was their job, these 2. It occurred yesterday morning around 10:30 Mountain Time, that is. So a little later for us here. So deputies on the county jail security team, they approached a man sitting on the grass outside of Salt Lake City Sheriff's Office building. An altercation ensued. 1 law enforcement officer was shot in the face and the other was shot in the eye. The suspect was killed in an exchange of gunfire. The deputy's in stable condition. He was grazed on the cheek by a bullet. He'll be released from the hospital. I think he was released at this point. The names of the deputies, I don't think they're out there yet. But the deputy who sustained the gunshot wound in the eye, he's in critical condition, undergoing eye surgery. He's expected to survive. Obviously, he'll be blind in that eye. So this is happening. Meanwhile, if you haven't seen it, I'm sure you can catch it on the news or even Google it. There's a video circulating of a couple New York police officers just in their cruiser and being harassed. And these punks are right up on the police with a megaphone, screaming at the police, calling them names, putting a little plastic pig, literally a little plastic pig, on the car and is yelling, "I want your badge number." Well, you know what? I want that officer's badge number too, because I'd like to reach out to the New York Police Department and even that jamoke of a mayor to tell them I admire the restraint and professionalism of those police officers. They Should have got out and arrested those POSs. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. Let's go to the phones. Mark in Worcester. Good morning, Mark. You look marvelous.
And you look marvelous as well from your secluded but not overly ostentatious
You got
studios.
That. That's right. I'm only going to have this remote location
right,
for a short time, Mark.
Why?
Moving.
There's guys in. Oh, you're moving.
I'm moving, so this studio will be rebuilt in the new location. Yeah. I got to go further underground.
Oh, I see. Okay. I don't blame you, brother. I don't blame you. If it's going to get worse and not better, you know that.
We're headed out to the.
Unless
the
you
compound.
change your tune.
The compound out in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, that's where the Trump family had to go when. Remember when the White House was under siege? He and his whole family, they were ushered into the bunker of the White House because they feared for their lives. Remember that?
I do remember that, and I remember that, of course, the left, CNN and all them gave a bunch of crap to them. And I got to tell you something. I said it then, and I'll say it now. When it comes to that situation, the president doesn't make the call, the Secret Service does. And the Secret Service determined that there could be a breach at the White House, and they put the president and, the cabinet or whoever was with him and his family downstairs in the bunker. They have no say in that at that point. If the Secret Service have to pick the president up and drag him with his feet in the air, they will do that. Trust me, it wasn't Donald Trump saying, I want to go to the basement, I'm scared. He was told, Mr. President, you're being moved.
I was being facetious when I made that statement because the mainstream media just ignored it when fireworks and pyrotechnics were exploding right on the front lawn of the White House, and they got so freaked out they told them, "You got to get in the bunker. We don't even know if we can control this." You remember that? But they didn't call it an insurrection then. They didn't call it an insurrection then, did they?
Great point. Because
and how many of the people
when January 6th
there were tens
happened,
of thousands of
that's
people
exactly
involved.
what I was saying when that was happening. And say, wait a minute, if this is insurrection, what was happening at the White House that day was also insurrection. And what about the night of the convention or whatever that when they were leaving the White House? I mean, Senator Rand Paul and his wife were harassed and attacked. It was just a couple of police officers by themselves that put their bodies between the mob and the senator and his wife and their guests to get them a few blocks.
And prevented them from getting killed.
Exactly. And that even happened to Dan Bongino. And what I would like to have seen is they talked Dan down. But I got to be honest with you, I'd feel sorry for whatever punk got on to Dan Bongino and got him pissed off, because I don't think that would turn out well for that person.
But it was all considered, quote, peaceful protest, okay? They didn't have a dragnet for everybody that was there, did they?
No.
Like they did for what happened. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. It's just all BS. Anyway. So anyways, a 3-year-old and a 16-year-old were shot in Hartford, Connecticut last night. 3-year-old, 16-year-old. Last night, a grandmother was shot in Dorchester. Last night, 5 separate homes, private homes, were broken into, and guess where? Newton, Mass. Okay? Pretty wealthy town. 5 of them. 5 homes broken into, separate private homes in Newton, Mass. last night. Did you hear about that?
No, I did not watch the news this morning. I'm sorry I missed that. I would end up catching that later.
All right. Well, anyways, all 3 of those incidents took place just last night. Now, I wonder if Newton has a reputation as a fairly liberal town, does it not?
It does. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. There are a lot of moonbats in good old Newton. I wonder if they're going to be rethinking. I wonder if they're going to be rethinking the their liberal defund the police stance when 5 separate homes get broken into in one night in the town of Newton. I think they're going to be rethinking that.
Well, yeah. Mark, we've got that problem everywhere going on, that all these communities that defunded the police, right, they got these skyrocketing crime rates going on, and people are forgetting that Portland, it's happening every day in Portland. That stuff didn't go away, folks. It just didn't go away. So now we look at, Portland, right? 25 homicides, shooting incidences, 288, and 92 injuries. Then you've got, New York, ridiculous. New York crime, year to date, murder is up 19.5%. Auto theft up 17.6%. Shooting incidences up 56.7%. That's year to date. And then we got this case of those girls, the 15-year-old girls that planned the whole Uber Eats hijack, right? They brought a stun gun to the scene. So they call this guy, Anwar. Here's an immigrant who came to the country. He's all legal. He's doing it. He's following the dream. His limousine company, it slowed down because of the pandemic. So he took this job, Mark. He went to the, to the Uber Eats thing so he could feed his family.
I heard about it, yeah.
So he shows up. They stun him with the stun gun. He's fighting. Nobody does anything. Watch it all go on. The girls take off while he's still holding onto the car, crash and flip the car, crush this guy and kill him. She's yelling, I left my phone in the car. Nothing about the fact that she just murdered this man. And they want us to feel sorry for these girls? That was murder. That's felony murder. There was a murder in a death.
What about the black guy? What about the black guy who kicked the crap out of that 65-year-old Chinese woman in New York? That's just another incident.
Yeah, Mark,
they don't talk about that either.
That one,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that one is horrible, and it's so much more horrible because that man really should not have been on the street. And I'm sorry, we can debate that, folks, if you want to. He murdered his mother, and he wasn't ready to be out in society. He was not safe to be out in society, and they did run with the anti-Asian aspect of that. But how about if we just focus on the fact that a younger, large man smashed this elderly woman and kicked her in the head several times. And again, Mark, people watched it. Now, I'm not saying that you have to jump in and attack a 6'5", 320-pound guy, but you can call 911 from inside your store. They did nothing to help this poor woman.
They were just standing there watching it.
Yeah.
They're like it was a skit on Saturday Night Live. They were just all standing there watching it, including the hotel security people. They were just standing there watching it. They did nothing. Anyway, the point is that crime, since Trump has left, violent crime is going through the roof all over the country. That's a fact. And the mainstream media, they give it a good living alone, like Howie Carr says. They don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And the last thing I want to bring up is this. Where is the hue and cry from LeBron James, where Muslims are being thrown into concentration camps in his beloved China? Not only the Muslims, Chinese Christians are being thrown into concentration camps, and I understand if they do not renounce their faith, some of them are being subjected to torture. Where's the hue and cry from LeBron James and the NBA and Major League Baseball? Can I have the cricket noise, please? Yeah. Have a good one, brother.
Thank you, Mark. Always appreciate the call. The answer to that is Joe Biden said it. Hey, those are just cultural norms that we have to accept from China. Are you kidding me? Seriously, Joe? All right, folks, it's time to take a break here in the first segment of the Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show. From the Box Drop Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios, I'm Joe Mangiacotti. We'll be back. Stick with us. Hey folks, Joe Mangiacotti here, and I have recently purged and refreshed with new furniture and, most importantly, a new bed. We spend about a third of our life on our mattresses, and it's so vital we have the right one, and we don't break the bank to do that. I first bought a mattress from the big store the brothers used to own, and a power base that moved the head and feet, and then I met John, and I checked out his showroom at 50 Main Street in Ashland and online at boxdropmiddlesex.com, and ended up with a better mattress, a power base that also heats and massages, all for less than half of what I was going to spend at the other place. Box Drop is a discount mattress store, and John specializes in clearance and closeouts, and he buys directly from the manufacturer with a low overhead and just family employees, passing the savings on to you, and you can see it reflected in the price every day. Click boxdropmiddlesex.com or call John on his cell. This is his cell number, 508-579-9303. That's 508-579-9303. And you can find John on Facebook at Boxdrop Middlesex. John loves referrals, and this is the best referral I've given so far this year. Dropboxmiddlesex.com.
This is Sean Burke, President of the Licensed Private Detectives Association of Massachusetts, asking you to visit us at lpdam.org when you think you need a private investigator. Don't let your emotions negatively affect your future. Get your answers through a Massachusetts licensed private investigator. Get the facts without risking your credibility by unknowingly committing a criminal offense. You need a license to perform investigations in Massachusetts. What are some types of work that requires a license? Any type of surveillance, interviewing someone for a third party, background and asset checks are just a few examples. For more on this, visit us at lpdm.org and tune into AM 830 WCRN Sunday mornings at 7:30 for case files from the LPDM or anytime at lpdmcasefiles.com.
We know why you're awake. Your child is about to get their driver's license. Levante's Auto School offers one-week driving programs to help make sure your child stays safe and focused behind the wheel.
877 Drive Ed.
Who's Ed? That's the number for Levante's Auto School.
Learn to drive safely and efficiently. Visit one of our 5 locations throughout Massachusetts. Click Levante'sAutoSchool.com.
Levante's Auto School shows you how to learn the rules and keep your cool. 877 Drive Ed.
Who's Ed? That's the number for Levante's Auto School.
It's time to go out with Joe.
Welcome to this edition of Out with Joe, brought to you by Nothing Bun Cakes in White City Plaza in Shrewsbury. I'm Joe Mangiacotti, and on this week's Out with Joe, well, we look at Hollywood once again as it descends on Worcester. 2-time winning Sexiest Man Alive, a.k.a. George Clooney, has been in Worcester along with Ben Affleck to film Amazon Studios' The Tender Bar, a film by Pulitzer Prize-winning writer J.R. Moehringer's memoir, which recalls the writer's life growing up on Long Island and searching for a father figure among patrons of his uncle's bar in the 80s. Clooney is also the director of this movie. In addition to Worcester, Clooney and company have been seen in Watertown and Lowell to recreate the neighborhoods of 1980s New York. American Horror Story, Lily Rabb and Ty Sheridan, who were on the set on Lowell Friday, along with Ben Affleck, are starring in this Amazon studio film. The movie script was written by Dorchester native William Monahan, who won an Oscar for The Departed. In other news, Worcester Restaurant Group owners Rob and Madeline Alquist have operated the family business for more than 40 years, opening the sole proprietor, 111 Chop House, and Via Italian Table together. The owners of the Worcester Restaurant Group are passing the torch down to the next generation as they name their daughter, Caitlin Carolan, as president. As president, she will be responsible for directing and overseeing the operations, marketing, and financial aspects of the 3 restaurants. She served as the chief operating officer of Worcester Restaurant Group prior to being named president. The Alquist said they will continue to be involved in the strategic planning and ongoing development of the culture and customer care and hospitality experience. Well, a big surprise for a group of restaurant workers as their boss gave them a hefty bonus. The employees of the Heinz Restaurant Group, based on the South Shore, thought they were attending a staff meeting about the upcoming summer season. Instead, They were surprised with bonuses totaling $100,000. The money will be split between employees of 3 of the restaurants that the group owns. For more on dining and entertainment, click outwithjoe.com and follow us on social media at OutWithJoe. Out with Joe has been brought to you by Nothing Bun Cakes in White City Plaza in Shrewsbury, on Facebook at Nothing Bun Cakes Shrewsbury. Have you heard of the hottest new bakery around? I know you heard about it right here. My friend Al has opened Nothing Bundt Cake in the White City Plaza in Shrewsbury. Nothing Bundt Cake is a bakery chain and is locally owned and operated by my friend Al. They have bundt cakes ranging from bite-sized to tiered, plus platters, candles, and cards. For any occasion, function, or just to have around the house or office, stop by and check them out. Everything is baked from scratch and on site. Nothing beats a sweet surprise. And until you try one of Al's bundt cakes, you haven't tried a real bundt cake. Stop by and ask for Al. Tell him Joe told you to stop by. 98 Boston Turnpike, White City Plaza near Planet Fitness, Shrewsbury, and on Facebook as well, Nothing Bundt Cake Shrewsbury.
To join the conversation, call 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. Now, here's your host, Joe Mangiacotti.
From the Box Drop Middlesex Mattress Studios. That's right. It's a broadcast from a undisclosed location, a secure undisclosed location. And yes, Mark, we are broadcasting from our palatial but not overly ostentatious studios here. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. Don't forget that you can stream us on the TuneIn app as well as our Facebook page, Joe Mangi, M-A-N-G-I, Joe Mangi Show, Facebook page. Hey to everybody who's watching that, but the important thing is the audio is streaming there. So, Mark, I didn't see the news. I tried to get to sleep early last night, and I hadn't watched the news early this morning, so I did not see those stories on the grandmother in Dorchester, the homes in Newton, but we're seeing crime rise. If you defund the police, if you eliminate some of these specialty police agencies within the agencies, right, the gang units and things like that they did in New York, and you reform the whole bail concept. In other words, you do away with bail, and these criminals are on a revolving door. And I know that's an expression that we've had in the past, but literally they're not they're out before the police officers finish the paperwork and get back out on the street. And we've had this happen. We saw it in New York. Bank robbers arrested, brought in, let out an hour later, go rob another bank in the same day. And then we have, even here in Massachusetts, our own DAs that aren't going to even arrest for crimes under a certain amount of money. So what does that mean to the store owner? That's just a big screw you. You work 60, 80, 70, hours a week, your life savings, your family business to feed your family, keep a roof over your head, and people can just come pick through your stuff with no consequences whatsoever. What is that about? 508-871-7000 from the Box Drop Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios. Let's go to the phones. Ken in Bolton. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Joe. I'd like
great.
to pick up on the topic. Thank you very much. I'm sure you are too.
I get to be in my PJs.
Good. There you go. I got sweats.
Good enough.
But I'd like to pick up on the topic that Mark initiated as far as rising crime rate, because we ain't seen nothing yet.
I agreed.
And we know the event that is going to blow the teapot off the stove. And it's the case in Minneapolis.
Well, yeah. We have the same concerns, or should have the same concerns there that we had when OJ's, verdict was coming in. And they're going to have to brace accordingly, because it's become acceptable to act like animals. It's become acceptable to operate with mob mentality. Why is it so difficult to understand that the legal system, the laws that we have, for the most part, they work when you allow them to work. And just because a police officer ends up shooting or hurting, and I'm not diminishing George Floyd, please don't get on that. I'm talking in a general thing here, folks, that it's okay to decide they're guilty without the process, which usually involves an investigation, an arrest, an indictment, a trial, a decision. All of that seems to go away, and mob mentality takes place. And then you've got people, the authorities, right, the prosecutors, the judge, and even members of the jury, who are afraid of following whatever their law is, or whatever the instructions are, I should say, from the judge, and then they're afraid of the consequences by the mob. So they're going to make decisions based on that and not on evidence, and that's what I'm always afraid of in that situation.
Well, let's talk about the evidence as it is and try to avoid feeding the mob. So we're picking up information. From what I understand, the prosecution has completed its portion of the trial, or at least very close to.
I'm not watching this trial every day, so I can't speak intelligently. A lot of times when these things happen, I'm on it every day. I'm watching it in every inch. I haven't done this with this trial. I'm just getting the highlights, so you might know better than I exactly what's being said and where they are in the process.
Well, let's just try to break down the basics. Obviously, the events occurred and resulted in the death of George Floyd. So the primary time, or most of the time in the case, has been to try to determine what caused his death. Because after all, if it's with beyond reasonable doubt that the actions of Chauvin caused his death, then he's likely to be found guilty of one of the three charges at least. Mm-hmm. So let's determine the health situation of Floyd. So before that day of his death, he had health conditions. And then on the day of his death, he consumed a fatal amount of fentanyl. And it would appear that his pusher was in his vehicle just shortly before the apprehension that occurred. And that it appears that it's his pusher who had him, for instance, exchange the $20 counterfeit and was involved in his taking, obviously, the fatal amount of fentanyl. So we don't know if that itself was the cause of his death, or obviously the third one, the primary issue, the actions of Chauvin. Nonetheless, the jury is left to try to sort that out. And, they've had many experts review the conditions. You had probably for the prosecution, I guess, the strongest expert who was certain that it was the actions of Chauvin who caused death. Now, this isn't someone who actually examined Floyd, but simply made those statements based on the video that person observed. But there's many nuanced and expert differences. And the other issue that arises as to what is the training that the Minneapolis police provided to their officers in such a circumstance. And that's what makes this whole situation so difficult, is that there were so many things occurring that you literally have to determine that the intent of Chauvin was to kill Floyd.
Right, and I think
at least some point, or at least there was a very reckless action that at the minimum could be determined to be manslaughter.
Right, and that's the thing, folks, is that there are different degrees of murder as well as manslaughter and unintentional killing of somebody. And can you hit it right on the head? I mean, I haven't been following it that closely, so I don't know exactly where they are in the process, but there are a lot of moving parts here. And you're right, they've got to look into was the officer following the training that they received, the policies of the police department, and the norms here. And there may have been, or there apparently, it seems, based on the evidence presented anyway, or what I've seen in the news, is he had a lot of health issues. He had drugs in his system, all of these things which maybe he could have died. But even if they determined that Officer Chauvin contributed to the death, that because of his actions, it aggravated or just contributed, there's at least a manslaughter charge that could be found there. So, the man did die, and he stopped breathing, and that I saw on the news, Ken, that he did actually stop breathing while his knee was on his neck. So the man did die while this large man had his knee on his neck and he couldn't breathe. So I really can't see how all responsibility of this man's death could be removed from Officer Chauvin. At minimum, I would think they're going to find contributory reasons for his death there. Most of us saw that and we thought we were watching a slow motion murder. Did we not initially? I mean, not knowing the condition or the circumstances around George Floyd yet? What did you think when you first saw that?
Right. If all you see is that portion of the video, then it looks atrocious.
That's it. It is.
But that's why we have trials.
Exactly.
Chelsea Handler's comments are absurd in a nation that has laws, where you actually have a justice system.
She is such a jamoke, man. So what did she say? Because I don't ever pay attention to that woman. Tell me what it is that she said. This ought to be a good one, folks.
Well, she said, "Why are we even having a trial?"
You kidding me?
It's obvious.
My God. Why
that's what she said.
See, this is the
And just,
arrogance of the Hollywood elite and the left, right? Why are we even having a trial? We've decided. We're smarter than you. We know what's best. He's guilty. Why are we having a trial? Let's just, take him out to the firing squad or strap him in the chair or throw the rope over the branch. Whatever it is, why are we even bothering with the trial? I've decided the man's guilty. That's all you need. That's it. No more evidence, no more trial.
And that is the mindset that will, regardless of what happens, they're just prepared to explode. Yeah. And the media is going to promote that explosion. That's what they want. And the truth be damned. So for those who do want to follow, and you mentioned follow the news, I mean, you just can't follow the news on this case. You really should follow those who are more expert in this process. There's a particular YouTube video, Viva Frey, that's V-I-V-A, F-R-E-I. He's a Canadian lawyer, and he teams up with a U.S. high-profile lawyer, Robert Barnes, to review the case. And so if somebody really wants to know what's going on in the case, I would follow that. Or Tim Pool does a terrific job of following it also. And you'll be far more informed than you will watching the mainstream media.
Yeah, and that's why I said...
But nonetheless...
I was just going to say, that's why I decided I am not going to literally take up my entire day watching the news coverage of this to try to analyze it, because I wouldn't get anything else done and I'd go crazy. And that's exactly what I do. I try to go to those people I trust who don't have a political agenda, who are going to be able to tell me or tell us on whatever YouTube or whatever podcast or something that they have, what the law is, what was presented for evidence, how does it play in. That's what I need. I don't want the bias and the political slant to it. So I'm not familiar with Pool, but or the other guy. But I thank you for that tip, because I'll go check them out and catch up on the case that way.
Tim Pool is a liberal who is where the action is when it comes to riots and the like, going back many, many years. So I follow him for like 4+ years. And he does a terrific job. And he has a very large following on YouTube. So literally you just type in Tim Pool and his latest. He has daily stuff that comes out, and he does a terrific job.
You know,
but let me kind of cross over into. But
I was just going to say the other person I like to
Viva Fry
is Andy No. He's the Asian reporter, independent reporter, and he has that book out on mass. He's the kid. I say kid. He's like in his 20s, but he's the one that the Antifa crowd beat up. And here he's Asian and gay, so he's got a couple boxes checked in the minority, box list there. But they didn't like the fact that he was there covering it as part of the media, and they beat him up. They hospitalized the guy.
Right.
But if you follow him on Twitter, he is in the thick of it. So you'll get real-time on-the-street reporting and video, whether it's from Portland or anywhere else. He seems to, jump all over the country following the news where it is. So he's another good one, folks, to watch.
Yeah. Andy No is comparable to Tim Pool. They have a different avenue that they have followed, but they both are great at, on the scene of, and they can report based on what they have been observing as opposed to second, third-hand information. But where I wanted to go with the case is I think what is going to be critical when it goes to defense is determine that what did the Chauvin and his partners evaluate as to the condition of Floyd, because if at any point it's suggested that they knew that he was overdosing, then I think that lends credence to the manslaughter charge. But the prosecution hasn't gone down that path during their chance, so it makes you think that they didn't recognize that he was overdosing. And in fact, when they were reacting to his fighting back, so it's sort of contradictory information that suggests that he was close to death, and yet he was fighting back. Well, if they didn't realize why he was fighting back, and they were reacting to the crowds around them. Now, the crowd around them were shouting at the officers to back off, and yet they're not backing off. They have been what they're trained to do. And that may explain why he was applying force for as long as he did. And as awful as it looked, if they didn't recognize that the perp, as they considered it, was overdosing, then they didn't recognize the tragedy that they were creating. And in fact, then they probably don't have the proper charge for the situation. That it doesn't even rise to manslaughter. And yet all of these facts, if true, won't matter because the mob is just going to emote, period.
Yeah.
They're not going to think through, what's the fair thing. They're going to commit crimes at an elevated rate, and it's possibly going to make the L.A. riots of, 68?
Yeah.
Or the late 60s? Make that look like nothing.
I know, like a walk in the park.
Or for that matter, the riots we had last year.
This is true. We had an entire summer of unbelievable. I mean, people were literally murdered and executed. Not just died in the crossfire, but executed last summer. But again, that was an insurrection. That wasn't nothing to see here. I mean, we literally had the CNN reporter saying these are mostly peaceful protests while there's fire behind him as they burn buildings down. But the other thing that I caught on this in one of the news reports, Ken, and maybe you got more of this, was this whole issue, right? It stemmed from the fact that he attempted to pass a fraudulent, counterfeit $20 bill. And one of the reports says, that really shouldn't even been an arrestable thing, that they should have issued, I guess a ticket or summons that, to arrest for a $20 bill at a convenience store. That shouldn't have warranted that, which of course, if they hadn't tried to arrest him, right, then everything else would not have ensued. The dominoes wouldn't have fallen. And that's interesting, because is that the norm? I mean, counterfeit money is counterfeit money, but when somebody complains at a convenience store about, hey, this is a phony $20 bill, are the police actually going to arrest you at that point, or just simply I would think take the $20 bill and just write a report about it. Unless you're, if you're caught with a suitcase full of these, right? Obviously, there's more to the story, Ken.
Well, the bottom line is we don't know exactly what triggered the police to apprehend him in the first place. I mean, the primary objective may have been trying to separate a drug deal. Yeah. So I think they knew at least after the incident they were able to pick up drugs that were left in his vehicles or in his vehicle for which they apprehended him. Right. So, we've only heard the prosecution side, and so far it hasn't even been all that strong. In some cases, it's been to the benefit of the defense. They already have at least one of the witnesses.
Have they rested?
The defense is intending to re-examine.
Has the prosecution rested?
Yep.
All right. So now, Monday we're
that's what I was asking you. I think. Yeah, I think either it has rested or it will soon. And so now, in effect, we're going to have a mainstream media blackout because they're not going to talk about anything that the defense comes up with that is in any way helpful to the defense. We know what their game is.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I can just picture the CNN talking heads talking about the defense and laughing at it, and picking it apart, and saying, "Oh, how ridiculous!" I mean, that's just the norm for them. But it's going to be interesting, right? Let's see what the defense has to say because that's the opportunity that things we haven't heard will come out. And that's the whole.
Oh yeah,
purpose of the defense.
And I guarantee you part of it will be the reasoning for the length of hold was the reaction of because effectively, if they were to release Floyd where there was some possibility of his getting up and fighting back, then you would have had a riot where effectively the police would have been attacked by everybody around them as they would try to fight the police in the same way Floyd. Now, as it turns out, it was quite the opposite. Floyd was incapacitated, and whether it was the drugs that killed him or the force of the officers or some combination, there we're left with a tragedy that we have to sort out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing on that is police ask any veteran police officer, anybody that has been an officer in a city and on for a little while, and they'll tell you that when you do come across somebody on certain drugs, they are just you can't reason with them. They're out of control, and the adrenaline is kicked in, and they have what appears to be superhuman strength. And they've taken. I mean, my father has told me the stories of one guy putting down 6 officers while they were trying to arrest him because he was tripping. And like I said, the adrenaline goes, that strength comes in, and so you don't know what was going on. But again, we're going to have to break here for a second.
So in this case, you got somebody that's about 6. Floyd was like 6'3", 250.
Yeah, he's a big
so
guy.
You put those conditions with what you're just describing.
Yeah.
But how often does the person that they're apprehending consume the amount of drugs that he did that make the person close to death? So how, in fact, do you apprehend the person in that situation? And he'd already done it at least once in a similar manner.
Yeah. Well, I think you make a great point because we have to brace for the verdict of this trial because we do have the Chelsea Handler, idiots of the world out there. We do have people who decide that, again, the mob mentality, that's the true justice, right? Street justice is the true justice now. So it's horrible. If we have an administration who is not going to take the preventative measures that they should in this. I mean, even when Trump was in office, right, the governors and the mayors of these cities wouldn't let him squelch it. I mean, and when they did let him, right, it was done pretty quickly and efficiently.
And you already have instigators who are warning what they're going to do.
Yeah, they do.
Boldly.
Hey, Ken,
right
we're
on
against
public.
the clock, buddy. Thank you for the call, but I have to break. Not much I can control about that. The time is the time. Thanks for the call. Again, folks.
All righty.
All right, Ken, take care. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. All right, folks, that's going to wrap up hour 1 of the Joe Mangiacotti Show. Stick with us. We'll be back for hour 2 shortly from the Box Drop Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios. I'm Joe Mangiacotti.
WACE Chicopee and WCRN Worcester.
7 o'clock.
Hey folks, Joe Mangiacotti from the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. Reminding you, talk radio is the immune system to the partisan, bias, political rhetoric attacking us on a daily basis. Get inoculated. The Joe Mangiacotti Show is your vaccine. Join me weekend mornings, 6 to 8.
I want to tell you what Cantiani Insurance has been able to do for me and Teddy. We stopped in to see Paul Sr. and the great staff at 318 Plantation Street. They've been handling my car and business insurance for years. Teddy was making his way around the office, and they let me know. They now offer pet insurance. For a fraction of what one visit to the vet was for Teddy, they could cover him for a whole year. I know you treat your furry family members like any other family member, and as well as I do Teddy. The professional staff at Cantiani has been providing courteous service for over 40 years, with integrity and personalized service, making sure that your insurance actually protects you and your family. With 2 locations, the 318 Plantation Street in Worcester and East Douglas Insurance Agency, located at 306 Main Street in Douglas. For home, auto, business insurance, and now pet insurance, click CantianiAgency.com or call 508-791-2088. 508-791-2088.
If you were to ask any retiree in a word, they would tell you that retirement is all about income. Income in retirement is a permission slip to enjoy life. Income provides the freedom to spend money each month, knowing that more will arrive next month and the month after that. As important as it is to accumulate assets for your retirement, it's equally, if not more important, to maximize the income being generated from your assets. My name is Jerry Doherty, and my radio program, Making Money Last, has been heard right here on WCRN. Well, do you know if your retirement income is as high as it could be? Are you living off less than you should be? Well, I'd like to offer you a complimentary review to answer that very question. Simply call my office at 877-772-1776. I'm conveniently located right on Route 9 in Westboro. Again, my number is 877-772-1776. Let's increase your income today.
So are you tired of being tired? Well, then it's time to get the tea. Hey, it's Lisa here to tell you about this all-natural, all-organic tea I've been drinking that has had great results for over 20 years. It's called Life Change Tea, and it's specially formulated to help detoxify and cleanse your kidneys, liver, colon, and blood all at once. The colon is one of the most ignored organs in the human body. The faster that waste is eliminated from the body, the less time that waste sits in our intestines, spreading toxins to our bloodstream. This tea helps cleanse chemicals caused by outside intruders from our entire digestive system, and get this, weight loss can be a side effect. And with continued use of the tea, you can experience clearer, healthier, younger looking skin, increased energy, and a happier outlook on life. So if you're tired of being tired, get the Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com, and like me, you'll be glad you did.
Mangiacotti Show from the Box Drop Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios. I am Joe Mangiacotti, and you can check us out, of course, online at TJMShow.com. You'll find our blog site there as well, and all our past shows as podcasts. Don't forget to follow us at our social media platforms at Joe Mangi Show, M-A-N-G-I. Do you believe when I tried to get these handles for social media that somebody had Joe Mangi? What are the odds of that? You wouldn't think somebody would have used that already. But of course, so we use Joe Mangi Show on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Rumble, YouTube, Parler, all of them. Don't forget, we do have our text line, 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. I actually haven't checked the text line in these past conversations, so let me do that and see what we got going on. No, nobody's texting yet this morning. That's odd. All right. Again, 508-871-7000. Join the conversation. Common sense talk for the common sense citizen. So one of these things that's out there, right, Joe Biden is coming out with executive orders to go after the guns. Now, that should not be a surprise to you because he said it. He said it during the campaign. Remember the Roberto, right, Beto O'Rourke? Yes, coming after your AR-15s, coming after your guns. And that always... I'm sorry, folks, but if you know anything about guns, you have to chuckle a little bit when they talk about the AR-15 as if it's the biggest, baddest weapon out there. It's in essence a .22, folks. I mean, it looks like an intimidating, automatic weapon, It's not. And semi-automatic is basically any slide-action pistol out there. And those on the left continually misuse the terms. They don't know a thing about guns when they start to talk about it. So he's coming after the guns. And one of the things that's being floated out there, and it's been out there for a long time, right? The red flag laws. And this is just an abuse of power that could very easily be taken advantage of. And it's been put in, right, in communities across the country. In essence, this red flag law, and you say at first glance, oh, it's something like that. I don't know what it is yet, but it sounds like it might be good because when we look back at these people, like the guy who shot up the cabinet company the other day, right? He was known to authorities. Everybody said he was unbalanced and so forth. But nobody went to intervene and talk to the guy. But what a red flag law does is it allows the police or authorities to come confiscate all your guns, but with absolutely no due process. There's no trial, nothing. Family member can say, hey, I think they might hurt themselves. You know, when people are pissed at you or you have arguments, it's amazing what they can do. And it's not outside the realm of possibility that somebody will use this to hurt you. And one of the basic rules, I'm going back to the initial law classes I took many, many years ago. One of the first things that the professor explained is the law is used as a shield, not a sword. And we see this with restraining orders. Even temporary, TROs, or temporary restraining orders, are used oftentimes as a sword, as a weapon, not as a shield. And that's what the law is supposed to be. So these activists, right, Katie and Matt, I'm taking this from a town hall article, and they're activists. And they're talking about Biden's executive orders on guns and the red flag laws. Now, according to the White House, the Justice Department within 60 days will publish model red flag legislation for states. So once again, we've got Biden who's going to, or the invisible hands of Biden guiding him, the true hands on the rudder, are going to come up with basically the outline for states to enact these red flag laws. These red flag laws often violate our civil liberties, specifically, again, that due process. There's none there. When we get into these stories that we can cite for the problems here, there's a Thomas Bigham. He's a gun rights activist. He even worked for the NRA at one time. And he was quite candid about his own personal experience He was living in Southern California with his family, and he used a firearm in self-defense during a home invasion. That's pretty much a textbook example of when you may need to use a firearm. In your own home, when a foreign entity comes in to do you harm, if you don't have a right to use a firearm for self-defense in your own home during a home invasion, when do you? He says the police took an hour to show up. Now, what's interesting here, I wonder if when they called the police, if they said, I'm armed, or I have a gun, or something of that nature, because I had that personal experience when living on the top floor of a condo building at one time. I thought it was very odd that in the middle of the night there was movement and noise on the balcony, which means that somebody had scaled the building. So from bed I called 911 to tell them what was going on. And the operator was doing her job, and okay, and we'll send somebody out there. And then I felt that for two reasons. One is I should inform them that there's guns in the houses and that I was armed, but also, two, for my own safety, so that the responding police officers would be told the homeowner has a gun, is armed. But her sense of urgency drastically changed when that tidbit of information was shared, by the way. So I'm wondering if that happened in this case. So the police take an hour to show up, and apparently the home invaders were stalkers, and they were trying to cause chaos. And there was a lot of confusion in the law here, because what followed was people would take in Bingham family members to court individually in order to get TROs, those temporary restraining orders. And when that happens, as I said when I started talking about this, is if there is a restraining order, temporary or otherwise, taken out, you lose your right to a firearm. You must surrender to the police. Well, that's the argument, of course. Do you really lose your right to it? But the way it's set up now is you surrender them or you face felony charges. And then you're faced with expensive lawsuits. Well, they're still being stalked by these home invaders. They were known to them. They were targeting this family. And there are some policies out there, by the way, for gun owners, that you can carry an insurance policy for that reason, that if you ever need to use your firearm, that they will come in with their lawyers, gun activist lawyers, gun rights activist lawyers. They'll put up the bail or anything if you get arrested. Now, obviously, for that insurance to kick in, certain things have to be met. They're not going to defend you or put up bail if you are a criminal, or you use your firearm outside of the accepted behavior. But the Binghams had a good lawyer, and ultimately that TRO was not granted, which the judge regarded as a waste of time. Nonetheless, the plight of the Bingham family experience was still very difficult. But when it comes to the due process, the Binghams and everyone else concerned with this is saying the same thing, that red flag laws involve even less due process than a TRO. And then you have maybe the hypothetical situation of People having their guns taken away over social media posts. So think about that. So the trolls on social media, they don't like your politics, they don't like what you post, they don't like the things that you say. Can they say they fear for your well-being or their well-being because of social media posts, in that the authorities then, under the red flag laws, come to confiscate your firearms? This is going to be a question of where the threshold is. If you lower the threshold, there are consequences which can be abused, even if intentions are good. So even if they are good in the first place and they're not vindictive. So it's not hard to get a warrant for police to take into custody those who are posing such danger. So we have a conflict with the Fourth Amendment as well. The U.S. Supreme Court recently heard oral arguments, and we have mentioned this SCOTUS case before, Kegniga versus Storm. It had to do with the warrantless searches, and SCOTUS lays it out. And the case stems from a 2015 incident in Cranston, Rhode Island. You might remember me talking about this before, in which police performed a wellness check on Edward Kegnalia after his wife reported that he might be suicidal. Well, the police come down and they decide, and they convince him, that he should be taken in for a psychiatric evaluation, which he did do and was totally cleared, by the way. But the officers entered his home and confiscated 2 handguns. Their justification for the warrantless search and seizure was that they believed Kegnilia posed a danger to himself and others. So he sued for violations of his constitutional rights, and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit sided with the officers, because the First Circuit applied the community caretaking exception. And that goes back to a case of Caddy versus Jimbrowski. And that was in the context of a search of a car, but that's what they cited for it. And they extended it to the exception to the home. And actually, Justice Sonia Sotomayor was one of the court's biggest Fourth Amendment hawks, raised a few objections, having the cops that much leeway to enter a home without a warrant. Good for her. There's numerous examples of constitutional concerns with these red flag laws, which are not merely to do with the Second Amendment, but with a whole host of others, like the Fourth Amendment. And that's why the NRA is raising a lot of red flags over the red flags law. So you got to watch this. We'll keep an eye on this, of course. But it's a multiple front assault on your Second Amendment, folks, that's coming. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. Lines are open and available. I'm Joe Mangiacotti from the Box Drop Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios. Follow us on social media, Joe Mangi Show. Now, you heard me talk earlier in my opening monologue when I made reference to now our highways are racist. Pete Buttigieg, our new Secretary of Transportation, says racism is physically built into the nation's road systems. And this is where that comes from, Well, you're driving around America. He says, have you noticed that racism built physically into the road system? How, do you ask? Well, the former presidential candidate asserted that a highway in D.C. specifically was built with bigotry. He says if you're in Washington, he's told that the history of that highway is one that was built at the expense of communities of color in the D.C. area. There are stories in, I think, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, this is him saying it. In New York, Robert Moses famously saw the construction of a lot of highways. Biden Transportation Secretary Pete noted that in some cities there are overpasses that were built low in black communities, as well as racially dividing roadways. He says if you think about it, much of this infrastructure was paid for and designed before the Voting Rights Act's 1965. And for this particular conversation, folks, when we're talking about infrastructure, we are talking about roads, airports, schools, power grids. Because as we've learned in the last week or so, right, infrastructure now means anything that the left wanted to mean. But he says that this was a time before black people were at the table. Highlighted by the inherent racism in America's interstate and highway systems. So, what he's saying is that when we were building these interstates, and we had to build the overpasses and the bridges, that there was bigotry in it because they would use this project, big highway, to literally divide areas of cities, right? The right side, wrong side of the track type of thing. To divide the white neighborhood from the black neighborhoods. That they would more easily disrupt black neighborhoods, go through them and decimate them to put an overpass or a highway through that area. So that's where the racism comes in. What's interesting about that, you have to ask yourself, okay, if, let's say that maybe that did happen, that these designers who were doing this actually had some of that attitude, right? Well, we'll put it through this neighborhood. We're not going to get a lot of flack about it because they don't have a lot of money in this neighborhood, so they can't hire a lot of lawyers, right? Why does 290 have that ridiculous S-curve over by Holy Name? Because we would have had, the state would have had, or the federal government would not have had much luck taking property over there by eminent domain. I'm pretty confident, right? So that's what they're saying. Now this happened, these roads were built 60, 70, 80 years ago. Some of these bridges 40, 50 years ago. Yeah, and a lot of them were built before the 1965 and 64 civil rights legislation. But don't you have to ask yourself, if you're born in the 60s, or born in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and you're driving on these highways, and you have no idea, does it matter? Does it exist if you don't know it exists? And if we're talking about roads that were built prior to 1965, hasn't the world around it changed? And I'm only saying this because the proposal that they should be rerouted at this point, what is that going to achieve? How is that going to fix anything? I would contend you'd probably end up displacing people of economic challenge more today. Again, that would happen, not on race, but every time we extend a highway, right, or we build an interchange, look what the Big Dig did to Boston. Businesses and residents get displaced. So I guess the question is, if you had no knowledge that any bigotry was present when these highways were designed and built decades before you were even born, is it racism today? Does it translate today? Does it matter today? When it happened such a long time ago. Before we have to wrap up this segment, I just, and again, 508-871-7000 to join the conversation, 508-871-7000. So apparently a prankster infiltrated the press briefing and kind of tricked White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki into thinking that she was a real reporter. Huh. So you would think Joe Biden, having been in government most of his adult life and having worked for Barack Obama for 8 years, might have figured out how to do things. But it's like Obama Defense Secretary Robert Gates said about Biden, that he'd been wrong on every foreign policy issue for 4 decades. Just extend that out a little bit here, folks. That he's been wrong on a lot of things, foreign and domestic so far. But apparently, one online gamer, and I hope you all know what that is, what a gamer is, right? But so this online gamer, and some of those online gamers, by the way, they actually make incredible money doing that, right? Who would have thought when you were a kid in the basement playing those video games and your parents would yell at you to get outside, get some air, don't waste your time, that you could make 6 figures, in some cases 7 figures as an online gamer. But anyway, folks, this online gamer thought the Biden folks had been so bad at transparency and the press hasn't been doing a good job, so she decided that she was going to infiltrate Jen Psaki's press briefings. And she even asked some questions that she thought the press should be asking. The person who has the online profile Casey Lego Montague, and Lego's in a quote, right? So I don't know if that's supposed to be reference to the Legos, but Casey Lego Montague claims she was a correspondent for the White House News and duped members of the White House press corps into asking at least 4 of her questions to Jen Psaki. Because of the limitations of the pandemic, some of the reporters are asking questions for the other reporters. We've seen that, right? So there are only so many allowed into the room, and they have to sit a few chairs apart, so they ask a question, and then they say, now I'm asking for somebody else. Montague contacted reporters from the Plain Dealer CQ roll call in the Washington Blade, who then asked Jen Psaki her questions. The questions were about COVID-19 travel bans, ambassadorships, Biden's reaction to Microsoft being hacked, and most recently about Biden's relationship with former President Barack Obama. So it appears to be one of the questions that Montague managed to sneak in through Chris Johnson of the Washington Blade, asking about the Obamas and how frequently they were in touch with Joe Biden. So she says, that her response is, well, they talk regularly about a range of issues, from policy issues to bouncing ideas off each other to their families. But she says those calls are private. She was then, of course, grilled about it the next day, about how often they talk. I mean, I think a lot of us would like to know that, just how often do they talk, and just how much influence does Barack Obama still have in the Oval Office with this president. But this girl Montague, in an interview, she said, I love journalism, and I think the press corps is doing a pretty bad job at the moment. So I decided I would ensure some transparency and ask some questions me and some friends wanted answers to. Well, let me tell you, Montague, a lot of us want answers to those questions. great job going to guess that she took things up a bit and probably made the questions better and more real, but apparently they didn't ask one question she posed, and that hit on the transparency. She asked the question, though. Recently, the White House has had readouts of calls and has the name of the people saying senior administration officials. So, why isn't the White House releasing the names of people in those calls, making these comments so that they can be held accountable to the American people? This is what Montague wrote. And that's a great question, because we are sick of both the White House, the current White House, and the media contributing endless things to what? Anonymous sources and unnamed individuals. We've had enough of that. All right, folks, we have to take a break for the final segment here on the Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. Stick with us. We'll be back on the other side of Joe Mangiacotti from the drop off. Hey folks, Joe Mangiacotti here, and I have recently purged and refreshed with new furniture and, most importantly, a new bed. We spend about a third of our life on our mattresses, and it's so vital we have the right one, and we don't break the bank to do that. I first bought a mattress from the big store the brothers used to own, and a power base that moved the head and feet, and then I met John, and I checked out his showroom at 50 Main Street in Ashland and online at boxdropmiddlesex.com, and ended up with a better mattress, a power base that also heats and massages, all for less than half of what I was going to spend at the other place. Boxdrop is a discount mattress store, and John specializes in clearance and closeouts, and he buys directly from the manufacturer with a low overhead and just family employees, passing the savings on to you, and you can see it reflected in the price every day. Click boxdropmiddlesex.com or call John on his cell. This is his cell number, 508-579-9303. That's 508-579-9303. And you can find John on Facebook at Boxdrop Middlesex. John loves referrals, and this is the best referral I've given so far this year. Dropboxmiddlesex.com. Good morning and welcome to Case Files from the LPDAM, where we take a look at the lessons from actual cases, the law behind the findings, and where we share the experiences of the experts of the Private Detectives Association of Massachusetts. Joining us this week is Sean Burke, current president of LPDAM and resident manager of Courtside Legal Investigation. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Joe.
Welcome back to Case Files. Always great to have you here with fantastic information.
It's great to be here, Joe.
I don't know why my thoughts go to embezzlement, Sean, but I thought it would be a good topic this week. Now, is embezzlement a criminal or a civil act, or is it considered both?
Joe, this is another great question that you have. This topic can affect so many lives when someone steals from a business. It can put a business in ruins or even bankrupt a business when money is being embezzled. To answer your question more specifically, embezzlement is a criminal and civil act. When an employee or third party with access embezzles money from a business, that would be considered criminal. What does this really mean? A person takes the money under the false pretenses, and their actions have no direct connection to the business activity. However, when a business partner or owner embezzles money, that is typically a civil matter, Joe. The person or entity that has suffered that loss can only file a civil suit as a remedy. When I have clients accused of embezzling funds, the pattern of funneling out the money always started small with little transfers or cash withdrawals. They use these small discretions to see who may be paying attention to their misdeeds. Usually in a short time, they begin to take larger and larger amounts, which cause shortfalls in the business and cash flow problems, and ultimately the business cannot pay its bills. This can be the death of a business, and there can be many victims beyond the business, while people lose their jobs and families really suffer with these types of crimes.
Sean, how does embezzlement happen to begin with?
Joe, in general, there are three key elements to embezzling money. The first might be the position of opportunity. The second would be trust. And third, failure to layer in safeguards to protect company assets. So let's start with position of opportunity. The embezzler has access to the books, to the money, and to the process in which the company operates allows them to manipulate their access and present or hide something within the world of numbers. Trust is the second criteria often seen in my embezzler cases. The person earns trust with others like management, ownership, and people with similar access to the books. This trust causes doubt and disbelief before an embezzler is fully exposed. And finally, failure to provide safeguards to protect company assets. This is the most important shortcoming we find in embezzling type cases. A company is more at risk when it does not have a checks and balance approach to the financials. Companies that have independent review of their books minimize losses. It's that simple. Joe, at LPDM, our members are well-educated, embezzlement, as well as many other business-type crimes. When you go to our website at lpdm.org, just hit the Investigator tab and you'll have access to hundreds of professional investigators at your fingertips. More importantly, you can search for a specific type of investigation and it will direct you to the members with that specific experience. Joe, it's better than a dating site. We want the best results for our clients, and it's a major reason why we put the website together in the first place. Remember, you're in good hands with LPDM.
You certainly are. And Sean, I think it's better than a dating site. Have you been on one of those lately?
I haven't.
Trust me, I'm sure it is.
Joe, I haven't been.
Thanks for stopping by, Sean.
Thank you, Joe.
And thank you for joining us for Case Files from the LPDAM. Join us here each week on WCRN 8:30 a.m. and online anytime at lpdamcasefiles.com. Of course, you can visit us at lpdam.org, and you can find LPDAM on Facebook and Twitter at PINMass and anytime 800-955-6274. For Sean, I'm Joe Mangiacotti.
To join the conversation, call 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. Now, here's your host, Joe Mangiacotti.
Welcome back. The Joe Mangiacotti Show here on AM 830 WCRN, our affiliates. And of course, we're live streaming on the TuneIn app, which means you can take us anywhere, including telling Alexa to play WCRN. She'll do it, no questions asked. And we're live streaming on my Facebook page, which is Joe Mangi Show, so the audio is streaming there. Our text line is 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. And to join the conversation for Common Sense Talk and Conversation from Common Sense Citizens at 508-871-7000 from the Box Drop Middlesex Mattress Outlets Studios. All right, so this is in the news because it kind of happened yesterday with, Friday. Again, it's Sunday already, right? So Biden has set up this commission to study basically how Democrats can pack the Supreme Court. And let's not get into the semantics of packing a court, but Joe Biden issued an executive order on Friday directing a commission of 36 scholars, former judges, lawyers, others led by former Obama advisor to evaluate expanding the number of justices on the Supreme Court. Now, why would you even do this? Ruth Bader Ginsburg said 9 works perfectly fine. Now, could it have anything to do with the former administration appointing 3 Supreme Court justices, as well as nearly 200 federal judges throughout the country? Why mess with this? And we have 3 co-equal branches of government. Why is the administration branch, the executive branch, rather, concerning themselves with the judicial branch this way? Now, they may not like some of the rulings, but that's tough. The court is supposed to make rulings based on the Constitution, and that's why there's 9 of them to counter each other. You don't start, and this is something that the left will do all the time, and that is change the rules. Have you been watching the debate over the filibuster? What do you think that's all about? If we can't get our ideas by legitimately, if we can't win you over on the merits of the argument, We'll take you out of the equation or we'll change the rules in our favor. This is how it's done. So they do it. The reportedly bipartisan commission has 180 days, 6 months, to provide a study to Biden. Now, again, I don't even think this should even be in the purview of the president to ask for. But anyway, for Biden for examining and outlining, get this, quote, the genesis of the reform debate, the court's role in the constitutional system, the length of service and turnover of justices on the court, unquote, as well as the court's case selection rules and practices. So what does that sound like to you? The court's role in constitutional system? It's pretty clear, pretty well defined by the founding fathers. What the judicial branch of the government does, what their constitutional role is. And it's not up to Biden or any of his appointees to question that. And then the length of service and turnover. They do not want the Trump appointees there for life. And they'll sacrifice some of their own because they're assuming that they will be in power and control for years to come, especially if H.R. 1 is passed. That's the whole purpose of H.R. 1, is to federalize the elections. And I've said this and broke this down to you before, that elections will be a matter of preordained candidates, and truly your vote will mean nothing. Quote, the Commission's purpose is to provide an analysis of the principal arguments of the contemporary public debate for and against Supreme Court reform, including an appraisal of the merits and legality of particular reform proposals, the White House said. Despite Biden's previous refusal to admit that he wants to pack the court, and the corporate press's inability to pressure him further on his position, he has faced mounting pressure from the progressives to take action and power away from what they see as conservative-controlled judicial body. They're ready to blow the Supreme Court up because Donald Trump appointed multiple Supreme Court justices. Now, during the time on the campaign trail, Biden signaled the court reform was a priority at the top of his agenda because the system is getting out of whack. Remember that incredibly succinct and astute observation? It was getting out of whack. Left-leaning Justice Stephen Breyer expressed caution over a politically motivated increase in the number of justices on the Supreme Court. He said that it would undermine the judicial branch's legal principle. No kidding. He went on to say that I hope and expect that the court will retain its authority, but that authority, like the rule of law, depends on trust, a trust that the court is guided by legal principles, not politics. Structural alteration motivated by the perception of political influence can only feed that perception, further eroding the trust. Absolutely. This should be halted in its tracks right now. The only transparency with this administration is just how blatant they are in their bias and in their lust for power. The late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg issued a very similar warning against expanding the court back in 2016. She said because it could damage judicial integrity. Let me quote her. It's important that the Supreme Court is able to resolve conflicts among other courts about what the federal law is. That's why 8 is not a good number. If we're unable to decide the question, you can have one federal law in one area of the country and the opposite federal law in another part of the country. 9 works, folks. It's a perfect number for the Supreme Court. Of course, the Republican legislators are also speaking out against this commission, warned Biden's decision should be anything but a surprise because Democrats have signaled the need for change for years, especially the 4 years Donald Trump was in office. So this packing, you can only pack the court if you have the numbers to pack it. In other words, that's not called packing and increasing the numbers. Packing a court is when those openings come, you're packing it with someone of political leaning. And what I find interesting is the test, that Trump put forward for justices was the Constitution, not their political stance, not their political activism. But Biden and Obama, Pelosi, Schumer, they want justices who are activists, and they want them to rule accordingly. That's why they would always shop when they had a challenge that they wanted to bring. They would shop it to judges into usually the 9th district, right? 9th circuit. Until they would find a judge that had those political leanings and would pretzel the heck out of the decision to get it to where they wanted it. This is not a good thing. We need to stop that. Now, the other thing going on that the Biden administration is trying to do that's kind of, they're trying to do it quietly, but I think a lot of you know this, is they're trying to put back a lot of Trump policies, or they're cloning them. I mean, even this whole Buy America, I mean, it's just a version of America First, Make America Great Again. But it's acceptable if it comes from Biden, right? When we look at all of these different things, right? Whether we're talking about Biden planning to solve the Israeli-Palestine conflict, or restarting the border wall construction to plug the gaps. Really? You think that's a good idea? Maybe you should start, or restart, I should say, some of that border wall construction. The one that you ordered to stop on day one, and now those contractors, they get paid. There are provisions in those contracts, people, that allow them to charge you, us, taxpayers, for not building the wall when they're under contract to get paid to build the wall. So here we have the materials sitting on the ground, on location, and the contractors are there, the plans are done, everything is done except actually the guys and girls getting up and going to work in doing it. And he stops it. So now he's considering restarting that to plug up those gaps. Antony Blinken, right? Biden's State Department pick. He said Donald Trump got it right when it came to China. And even recently, U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said just last Wednesday that tariffs imposed during the Trump administration have, in effect, helped save America. Wow. So he ran on that platform, and we heard it, right, condemning Donald Trump wherever he could. He was unfit. He was embarrassing. He was reckless. He was a buffoon. But while he's said all that and complained about him and all these things, and even saying that Trump will go down in history as being one of the most irresponsible presidents, his administration appears to be using his decisions, policies, and stances for their own administration. The wall one is the best. He was so quick to pull back the biggest of Trump's immigration reforms. He issued that executive order on the first day in office that terminated funding for the border wall. Now, right, that the border crisis created by Biden's rhetoric and his policies, and despite the fact that Jen Psaki said, or even Biden said at 1 o'clock or 1:30 in a weekday in a press briefing, now's not the time to come. The left point to that. You heard it last week on the show, actually, right? The left point to that and say, Biden said not to come. What do you think the chances are that the migrants on these multi-hundred miles, 1,000, 1,400-mile trek through South America are stopping at 1:30 and watching the White House press briefing so that they could get that message? Now's not the time to come. Because they already got the message that it is the time to come, because if you get here, you will not be sent back. Plus, you've got the cartels who, despite them being criminals, that does not translate to being stupid by any means. And they are now using our own immigration laws to make more money on the human trafficking over the border than they do on the drugs. And then we have the horrific conditions, and now I'm not even talking about the trek here, right? We've been talking about what they're subjected to by coyotes. Just forget the rapes and the abandoning them, and just the physical exertion of trekking through the desert and drowning, crossing the river, right? They've got to deal with all that. Then they get here. And those senators that went into that Texas facility, which the Biden administration has renamed reception areas from detention centers, again, we're back to Orwellian word game. They were asked to delete the footage that they took, and they didn't do it, thank goodness. But we see these conditions. They're horrible conditions. And they're talking about their answer is to open more facilities at taxpayer expense. They're going to the DOD, and they're using facilities on bases, which that is going to occupy our military's efforts, resources, manpower, women power, soldier power, even NASA internally, and we're not supposed to know about this because it got leaked out, to help house them. We know that the foster families in California and throughout the country are being asked, how many more can you take? There are a couple organizations out there where you can get licensed and trained to be foster parents specifically for these unaccompanied children, which actually I think is a wonderful thing if you do that. But meanwhile, at $60 million plus a week, which will translate to billions of dollars a year, these minors are crammed into subpar conditions. They're sleeping on the floor. They are not showering in days. They're underfed. And now we have credible accusations of being leveled of sexual abuse, sexual assault at one facility in Texas specifically, and if it's happening in one, do you think that they don't have that issue across the board? So now we have the Biden administration trying to downplay the fact that they are, A, admitting that Trump had it right on so many fronts, and that they're quietly trying to put back in place his policies. Hey, the China and foreign policy. And again, I go back to Secretary Anthony Blinken, right? Blinken admitted to the Senate that Trump was right to crack down on China. And he said, well, he disagreed with how the Republican president handled some things. He acknowledged that a tougher approach to China was the right one for American foreign policy. But we're back to the fact that we know that Joe Biden's compromised when it comes to China. He was on the phone. What did I say earlier when I opened up in my monologue? How does the President of the United States have a 2-hour phone call with Xi Jinping and not talk about the pandemic, the Wuhan virus, the Wuhan lab, the devastation it wreaked throughout the planet on the millions of lives and the trillions of dollars? When he tells us that all those atrocities that I told you about earlier are just cultural norms that we should have no concern with. Blinken also praised Trump for orchestrating peace between Israel and the other countries in the Middle East, despite his own office downplaying it later. He actually said, I think there are a number of things from where I sat that the Trump administration did beyond our borders that I would applaud. He put together 3 Middle East peace treaties, and there were more to come. The fact that he had Iran on its heels, and he had used that method, I guess, that he surrounded Iran, right? He struck deals with they told him he can't do it. This is how we did it. We send pallets of cash, and we try to be nice, and we hope that they'll like us. And Trump said, no, that's not how we're going to do it. We're going to squeeze them. We're going to strike deals with everybody around them, and they're going to have no alternative but to come to the table. And that's exactly where we were headed, and Trump even said it. He was reelected, that one of the first phone calls he was going to get would have been from Iran saying we need to talk. And what about the tariffs? Right? A lot of Democrats frowned on that.
2 minutes.
But the Trump administration's use of tariffs, especially those imposed on China, Biden's Commerce Secretary, Gina Raimondo, she told reporters that, again, some of Trump's tariffs have in fact helped save American jobs in steel and aluminum industries. What do we do with tariffs? We have to have a level playing field. China's actions are uncompetitive, coercive, underhanded. They've always proven they'll do what it takes. So the Biden administration defended Trump's tariffs just in March. After some corporations argued they illegally increased the number of Chinese good products to duties under the Section 301 of the Trade Act of '74. We're running out of time, folks, and this is going to have to wrap up the Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN from the Box Drop Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios. I'll be back next weekend and then on
W